Well, I think one of the things that I think we got to start out with is saying that marriage is a bigger reality than church or state, even. You know, that in other words, marriage is something that precedes the Christian church or any other religious belief or political system. You know, we do believe that marriage was ordained by God and therefore precedes everything else, so that within the created order, the God of creation brought about and therefore established marriage with its own laws and regulations. So in a sense, marriage is a reality that is bigger than, right? So having said that, yes, the Catholic Church's understanding of marriage is that of a covenant relationship. And that word is not used kind of too lightly. In other words, we don't speak of marriage simply as a contract. It's not, which I suspect, like the state laws that govern marriage would speak of it more in terms of contract. But for us, we have always spoken of marriage with a biblical understanding, therefore grounded in Scripture. Well, yes, but the sacramental part is an interesting thing that you raised that, because sacrament is really Catholic, very Catholic. But the Catholic Church recognizes all marriages as valid and good marriages, right? We do believe that Christ raised marriage to the level of sacrament. And so for us, between baptized persons, that's a sacramental marriage. But marriage between two Hindus, for example, or Muslims, or whatever religion or belief system, or no belief system, for us, marriage is still valid. Why? Because, as I said earlier, it's bigger than, it's a reality that is bigger than, and therefore is governed by what we call natural law, God's law, right? And so it's important to understand that. So we recognize as a valid marriage two Hindus or two Muslims who get married within their own tradition. We recognize any marriage as such as a natural law marriage. Now, Catholic marriage, while governed by natural law and civil law, must also be governed by canon law. Because as Catholics, you belong to a church, and the church has its own systems of law that govern their realities. So in that sense, Catholics also have to, their marriage and their understanding of marriage is governed by that. But the reality of marriage then is revealed to us through sacred scripture as well as tradition. Yeah, I think, well, you see, like marriage, like so many other realities of the human nature, affected by sin, gets distorted, you know, and that's why you have situations that are termed marriages sometimes that are really not marriage. You have situations of relationships of abuse, for example, that people live through. And clearly that's not marriage. But they exist. So yes, there are realities there within marriage that are not what marriage is meant to be. That call to become one, right? In a covenant relationship, that joining of spirits, minds, and bodies. And that's why that whole sexual dimension is also an important aspect of marriage.
Do you think basically the tradition of marriage, especially in Trinidad and Tobago, the culture, is probably dying?
I wouldn't say so. I think marriage over the years, yes, maybe there are sometimes when we have lived through from some of our parents and grandparents would recall a time when marriage was celebrated and held in esteem and the sacredness of it and so on. And that's not saying that they didn't had at that time too, you know, the distortions, but you know, more people were so inclined to move in that direction. So in other words, there might be some who would say today marriage is more the exception than the rule today. So there, in that sense, maybe there has been a decline, and yet, you know, there's still a significant number of people who still want and do, in fact, get married. But for me, that is not really the issue, that sometimes they're getting married for the wrong reasons. And their understanding of marriage is questionable.
Okay. If I say I'm Catholic and I wanted to get married, what is the procedure for me?
Well, because for the Catholic Church, the marriage for us is so important and so vital an experience, not just simply to grow church. In other words, it's through marriage that we get new members. Children are born and formed in the ways of faith, as well as society. Yeah? So, but it's so important to us that we have, over the years, you know, we try to help people to understand. I'm not sure that we succeed necessarily, but we try to, and that's why people see it sometimes as restriction or being restrictive, but it isn't. It's really helping, as I often say to couples, young couples coming, I said, you gotta believe that the church wants you to have the best marriage in the world. And you should want that too. And in order to do that, in order to understand this as vocation, as a way of life, that one is committing oneself to, I think you should be wanting to do everything possible to make sure that when you make that commitment, it's the kind of commitment and the kind of life that you would live that will truly help you to be fulfilled in your vocation as married people. And so, yes, you need to first make contact with your parish priest, open that conversation that and I encourage couples, once you're going steady, once there's, you know, the couple is going steady, they're showing strong interest in each other, they're not yet decided about marriage, but there is that, I think you should start that process. So go and meet and visit your parish priest, open a conversation with him, and start the process. The preparation there, which is not, is more the immediate preparation. You could speak of preparation prior to that, but that preparation is more immediate in the sense that you have now met someone who you're starting to feel you can share your life with for the rest of your life. And therefore, you want to start moving in that process of preparing yourselves for that. Is this the person? Should you truly move in the direction of making a commitment to this person? And how can we help you to discern that as a couple? And so the church has programs and different things that they help you with.
You want to elaborate on some of those programs?
Well, the first thing is that the priest will want to do is to try and determine, are you free to enter into marriage? So are there any blocks to prevent you from doing that? So that is done through a process of investigation by filling out form and asking questions and so on. Then they will help you to try and be part of what is called a marriage preparation course that is offered. In this archdiocese, it's offered in different forms, either a weekend preparation or an extended period of 8 weeks, meeting one evening a week or so on. That information can be available. But it's meant to help the couple, and again, you see many couples see this as restrictive, but it's really help. And we have had some cases where, having done that, a couple might come to the decision, no, we should not get married. Because things show up and you point you in a direction that you really should not proceed with marriage with each other. So that's that kind of thing. Other than that, one-to-one as well, sessions with the priest, usually your parish priest, that you are seeing in preparation for marriage. So that is also there. There are times in some of the parishes you may have seasoned couples who could also be help to young couples now thinking of marriage. So there are different things that can happen there, but they're all meant to help this couple truly discern if this is their calling, their vocation in life.
Okay. And could you explain to me, I understand you'll deal with unknown ones as well, and why?
Right. Well, this office where you meet me here is the Tribunal of the well, it's not just the Archdiocese, but this tribunal serves 8 dioceses. It's referred to as the Eastern Antilles Interdiocesan Tribunal. At the moment, I serve as the judicial vicar of that tribunal. The tribunal, the tribunal itself is for all causes, so penal causes as well and so on, but our majority of work is centered around marriage cases. When, as I said, some people enter for the wrong reasons and so on, marriage, after a few years the marriage break down, and then they would kind of come to this tribunal having had a civil divorce where the state, using that instrument we call a divorce, ends a marriage. The couple now, because they're Catholic, they can't, once they're married, it's for life. So they will now come to this tribunal and petition the tribunal to investigate what they thought was a valid marriage at the time, but now seem to have not been valid. And so the tribunal's work is to, through an investigation, looking at evidence that is presented and so on, to determine if that marriage celebrated then, back then, which everybody thought was valid, was in fact an invalid marriage. So if we'll give you just a little example to understand, a defect of consent. For a marriage to take place, 2 persons who are capable, right, have to personally give that consent to enter into marriage. If that consent is defective, for example, if one of the parties was pressured, strong pressure to make that choice or decision for marriage, then that decision to marry was defective, and therefore the marriage did not come about, right? So there are reasons why a marriage would have, that everybody had, that had the semblance of a marriage. People thought everything, you dress up as a bride, a groom, you go to the church, you said certain things, and everybody thought it's okay and it's valid. But when it was investigated after, we realized that this was never a marriage. And so the church, not a divorce is an instrument that ends a valid marriage. But in this case, the church, when it investigates properly, will say, while this had the semblance of a marriage at the time, upon investigation and looking at the evidence, we determined that it was never a marriage. And so a declaration of nullity is made, making that marriage null and void.
And how common is that? Okay.
Or too common, which is suggesting that we are not preparing ourselves for this great vocation of marriage. Couples are not preparing themselves. They're rushing into marriage sometimes for the wrong reasons or not clearly understanding what they're getting into. And too many cases. I think we need to really look at that and work hard to help couples to understand what marriage is, the great and wonderful sacrament of marriage, and to live it in ways that we think, it's, I say sometimes, I said, I think many of our relationships today move very quickly from friendships. You meet somebody, you become a friend. Before the friendship can develop, it moves to a different level. Very often it becomes rather physical. So it's a sexual relationship. It becomes physical, and the focus now is not on building friendship. And I think that's a bad thing, because what happens is that couples are entering into marriage, but there's no friendship to sustain them. And so it becomes more an emotional connection, a physical connection. And you and I know The emotions go like a roller coaster. One moment it can be up there, and next moment it can be down there. If you're building your marriage relationship simply on feelings, you're in trouble. And I think that's a lot of that is happening today. Love must be a decision. You must decide to love. And in those moments and times, and there will be times when you don't feel like loving, you can still make the decision to love. I think we need to really help our people and prepare them for this wonderful vocation in life, to live as a married couple, dedicated and committed to each other, for the good of each other, and for the raising, the begetting of children, and raising and forming those children for church and for society. When you have good marriages, you have good church, you have good society.